These people didn't read.
Okay. Um, David Iorio, sorry, Izzo, is with the Massachusetts Applied Science Septic, the Mass Tech. We'll just go with it with them. And he's in charge of the SUP program. He monitors the IA systems, and he has so kindly uh, offered to tell us about it and how he might help the Vineyard set up an SUP, which we often call an RME, which is a regional management entity. They changed it to SUP because it kind of made a little more sense and people understood it a little bit more than RME. They're kind of like, what is an RME? Where the SUP, but they have a great program in place. Our boards of health are already using their monitoring program, but I will let David tell you more about that. And thank you so much for being with us, David, and fitting us into your schedule.
Thank you so much for inviting me. So today I'm going to go a little bit
Yes, thank
over.
you, David.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm going to go a little bit over this what I've learned since I've joined the septic utility program. I have been here just a bit over a year, and I want to say that the program has been in place for about a year and a half, maybe just shy of 2 years. And we did rename it. It was one of the first things that I did do when I joined, because there was no recognition as to what we did. And I think it's really important for homeowners and towns to understand what our purpose was and why we were created. So, so I am actually, or I should say, the septic utility program is actually part of Barnstable County's Department of Health and Environment's wastewater division. And so that division includes Aqua Fund, which is our kind of financial part of the county. It offers low interest rates to homeowners who need to put in IA systems or EIA systems, and also sewer betterments. It includes MassDC, which is the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Test Center, and that's where my office is actually located. And that is, that's been, I think it's celebrating its 25th year or 26th year at this point, and it tests and certifies IA technology, and conducts research on various topics, everything from contaminants of emerging concern to urine diversion, and how can urine diversion be part of the mix as we start to look at solutions. It also includes the IA tracking database. That is something that the SUP actually oversees, and that database is the largest of its kind in the country, if not the world, but it's definitely within the country. It's the largest, and it monitors the compliance of IA systems and EIA systems. It makes sure that O&M contracts are in place. If a person has an EIA or an IA system, according to DEP, they need to have an O&M contract in place. Also, it keeps track of the sampling and the inspections of these systems. The county doesn't have really enforcement capabilities, so right now what we do for all the towns on the Cape and the islands, and actually towns off Cape, there's a few towns off Cape that we also are part of this database, and we'll eventually add more once we have more manpower or person power. We're just unfortunately we're unable to add more towns to our to the database until we have a staffing that can really handle that the increased numbers with bringing towns off Cape on. But um, we typically will, if there's no O&M contract in place, we will send out typically around 2 letters to homeowners. And if they're not compliant or non-responsive, then we refer it back to the health agents of each of the towns for enforcement. The health agents also have access to the results. We don't monitor those at this point. We supply them, and health agents and towns have access to them. So if there is a system that doesn't seem to be functioning the way it should, health agents and towns then kind of pursue next steps when it comes to that. And then, of course, lastly, the septic utility program is part of the wastewater division. So the reason why Barnstable County formed the SUP or the RME was really to help towns. The anticipation with the changes to Title V, the anticipation was that many towns were going to do watershed plans. And even if they didn't do watershed plans, there was mandates in nitrogen sensitive areas. There was a mandate from DEP that if a plan wasn't put together for a Cape town, that homeowners would need to upgrade to EIAs within now it's 4 years, but when it started, it was 5 years. We've lost a year. A year has gone by, so we've lost a year, and now it's 4 years. Fortunately, all the towns on the Cape are doing watershed plans except for one. So the watershed plan, that it can be a 20, 30-year plan. So there's not the immediate need for upgrading. Those upgrades are dependent on the triggers that are set by each town's Board of Health. And so we're starting to see changes. I don't think any of them yet have necessarily passed on Cape, but towns are looking to change what are those triggers to upgrade to an EIA system. And those plans also include other options like sewering, like cranberry bogs. It includes basically the whole package that the town is proposing to DEP to say, this is what we're going to do to reduce the nitrogen in our watershed. And then once DEP approves it, they issue a permit. And then the town is responsible to meeting what they said they were going to do. And so the county realized that most of this oversight would fall onto health agents, and they're doing so much already unless towns hired more staff, at least the oversight of these systems would be really difficult. So we don't mandate towns because we don't have enforcement capabilities, so we don't mandate towns to work with us. But what we do is we try to work with the towns in however they would need to utilize us, or how they feel they would need to utilize us. So in this presentation, I'm going to go over what the options that I have seen that really can help towns as far as the perspective of the RME. How can it help towns? And so that's what I'm really going to go over, because an RME can really be involved in the entire life cycle, legally can be involved in the entire life cycle of a septic system, of an IA system, EIA system, from installation all the way to replacement. But that may not be what towns need. And so I'm just going to go over what I found that towns need. So what is an RME, or as we call it, a SUP? So the basic way I can describe it is that it can function like a sewer utility, but instead of sewers, it manages residential, innovative, or EIA septic systems. Its purpose really is to ensure optimal performance, regulatory compliance, and then also the longevity of these IA septic systems. Towns and homeowners make big investments to put these in. We want to make sure they're going to last as long as possible, and also to perform the way towns need them to perform, and on the Cape, the way they've identified that they're going to perform in their watershed plan. We also want to be able to support the towns and the homeowners with really consistent, reliable, and also cost-effective, right, septic management solutions. And I'll get a little bit more into what I mean by cost-effective and why that's important. Our RME also oversees the IA database, which I talked about a little bit earlier. And we also chair the recommended technology panel. That's a panel that we assembled of experts in the field that are not tied to any technology. And originally, we had tasked them with creating a list of the best IA technology. DEP came out with a list before us. And so what we decided, we didn't want to have perhaps competing lists. So now what we're focusing on is we're taking that list, the banner, the best available nitrogen reducing technology list from DEP, and we're compiling a list of the performance data, which is available on our IA database, but we're taking it and making it easier for towns and homeowners to utilize, and really trying to compare apples to apples. So If there's anything that's slightly different with the system, we're identifying it. If it performs a little bit differently, we're identifying it. If it's a system that can't really stand alone, it has to be attached to an existing system, we identify that as well. Because we think it's important that towns have this knowledge, that homeowners have this knowledge. And so we're hoping that the first quarter of next year, that first iteration of that list will be out. And of course, it will be updated as new technology is added to the banner. We're going to update the list to then also give the performance data on that technology. So why the SUP? I gave the reason why Barnstable County created the SUP, but this is the reason, having now been part of this for a little bit over a year, I'm going to kind of give you the real world reasons, what I've seen. So the first is that the current paradigm does not work. And what I mean by that, we have we have the IA database. So we have a view of all of the systems that are part of that database on the Cape, on the islands, and even off Cape. And what we see is not all the systems are being tested or inspected as they should be, right? So if it's a provisional system, like a nitro, it has to at least be inspected and sampled quarterly. Well, we see situations when that's not happening. We also see systems where the O&M contract has lapsed and a new one has not been signed. A person hasn't signed up to a new one. We see that not all the test results are being entered in. As indicated by the permit, they're not all the information is being put in. Sometimes there's a delay. Sometimes there's information that hasn't been put in for, over a year. And so that's problematic. We also see poor performance or red flags from results that we don't see any notes on that they've been addressed. And now, not all notes make it into the IA database, but some operators will put notes, and that's extremely useful because, if you're a town and you're looking at your town, if you see performance data that there are red flags, but then you see notes as to how the operator addressed it, well, that saves you time, right? Now as a town, you don't have to now necessarily have to do as much follow-up if there's no notes, because if you don't see any notes, you almost have to assume that perhaps it wasn't addressed. And as far as cost and service, the second point, cost and service fluctuation by operator, those contracts, we see a wide range of costs, and we don't see everything included the same as another contract. So, some operators will include a certain amount of service calls, a certain amount of emergency calls. Other ones won't. Some may include, small part replacements. Other ones won't. So we see this fluctuation of what's included and what isn't. And, for a homeowner, who maybe doesn't have as much experience when it comes to like looking for a service agreement from for a septic system, that's really a lot on their shoulders to really figure out, well, who should I be going with? A lot of times it may be the recommendation of whoever created the system, or it could be from a neighbor. And so that's a problem because there should be consistency across the board. You really shouldn't necessarily be paying more than your neighbor is, or you shouldn't be getting more than or you shouldn't be getting less than what your neighbor is getting, right? So we see that's also an issue. The other fear that we have is the increased cost, right? So right now, prices can range from $500 for a contract to well over $1,500 for an O&M contract. With supply and demand, with more systems being put into the ground and the same number of operators, well, prices are going to go up. On the installation side, we're already seeing that. With the Aquafund program, we see what costs are. An example I like to use is on the Outer Cape, a system was being put in on a property. It was in Truro, and that particular property was part of a low income program. So that homeowner needed to get more than one quote. And so they did. They got four quotes. Those quotes ranged from $40,000 to $100,000. Same system, same property. That's a huge difference, right? And so they wound up going, I think they went with the second bid, which was like 45,000, a little bit over 45,000, which for that system was reasonable. But 100,000 surely was too high. And so not every homeowner is going to necessarily get four bids or even get more than one bid. And we see this problem on Cape just getting worse as more towns start to change their regulations, more systems are starting to be put in. We see this is going to be a supply and demand issue. And then the last part, the last two parts is, I mentioned this earlier, capacity of town staff. Town staff are going to have more systems that they're going to have to look at, more new systems, more IA systems that they're going to have to really be responsible for. Unless a town hires more individuals, that's obviously a problem. Health agents have a lot to do, as I mentioned before. Septic systems are not the only responsibility for them. There's a lot more than that. And so unless towns can increase their staff, there's not going to be enough people to do this. And then lastly is just, as I mentioned, this is a big investment for towns, for homeowners, and to the environment. And there really needs to be this consistent monitoring, but also prompt action. So, for instance, when we go out and we're doing a sampling, even if we're not the O&M contractor, even if we're just doing inspections and sampling, if we see numbers from either the lab or from being right there and taking field data, if we see something that doesn't look correct, if we try to correct it, number one, if we can. If we can't, we're notifying the maker of the system, we're notifying the O&M contractor, and we're notifying the homeowner. That doesn't always happen. And when that doesn't happen, small issues can obviously become larger issues, and we've seen that as well. So next, this slide says, what can the SUP do? So I said earlier, an army can do pretty much everything for the life cycle of a septic system. But these first three is what I have found most towns need either one or two of these, and it could benefit the most from at one or two of these. So I'm going to start from the bottom and then work my way up. So education is just, it's county-wide. It's not just per town. And that's something that towns don't necessarily, they're not responsible for it. Homeowners are not responsible for it. This is something that us as the SUP want to do. At MassTC, our facility, we're expanding it. We have classroom space that should be online early next year. And so what we're looking to do is put a certification process in, because we know that not every town is going to want to use us, but we still want to make sure that we're doing whatever we can to get the correct information out there, to have systems installed correctly. And if we're not doing the management of the system, that whoever is doing the management knows how to manage this specific IA system. So we're going to work with creators of technology and have education, classroom education, and then certify installers and operators, so that towns know that they've gone through a training with us and have at least seen how to install this system properly. I'm going to give you a perfect example because it happened today. So the system we went out today, it was installed at the end of September. We were taking initial readings of the system, and it was not installed correctly. Two pipes wound up cracking because the system settled and they cracked. Brand new system, hasn't really been working that long, and there's already cost to correct a situation that could have easily been prevented if it had been installed correctly. Luckily, in this situation, The cost is not falling onto the homeowner. The installer and the manufacturer are going to cover those costs, but these can be prevented if it was installed correctly. So that brings me to installation oversight. So really making sure that systems are being installed correctly is something obviously that the RME could do. Reviewing plans, the RME can do. But even more so, we talked about rising prices. So one way that you can combat rising prices is if you go out to bid for more than one system. So homeowners can't do that because they typically only need one system. Towns could do this. Towns could do it if they hold off on installations and they maintain the list of homes that need installations. They could go out to bid for multiple projects within a town and then lower costs through the economies of scale. That can be done. And some towns are actively looking to pursue that on Cape. Now, as a septic utility program, because we are county-wide, we can actually do it on a regional level as well. So I usually like to use the example of the Outer Cape because to get there if you're going to the Cape, to get there, it's the furthest part of the Cape, right? Excluding Provincetown because Provincetown is pretty much all Seward, but Truro, Eastham, Wellfleet, they're all pretty far out. And so if the towns agree to it, the septic utility program can go out to bid for systems within that town. A lot of those towns are, they border each other. There are properties that are very close. And again, through economies of scale, we can lower the price for each individual home by bidding for more than one. This also saves time for the installer. They're going out to one area. They know they're going to have 5, 6 systems that they're going to install consecutively. And so they can make sure they have the correct manpower, the correct equipment, and some of that equipment doesn't necessarily have to keep moving back and forth from another part of the Cape or even off Cape. The other two aspects that I find are really useful for towns from the perspective of what the SUP can do is around O&M or operation and management. The first one is just sampling and inspecting. And that's if a town really decides, you know what, we don't really want the total oversight of the septic utility program, but we do want to make sure that the data we're receiving and the data that's being input into the IA database is correct and is prompt. And so that is what that means. We would do all of the inspections, all of the sampling, and then also too, just because of the nature of what we do, proactive troubleshooting. So making sure that when we do a sample or get field data or inspecting something, that attention is given to it immediately. And if we can't correct it there, a lot of systems use recirculation. So kind of adjusting the recirculation so that it's working and we see it. We emailed the correct individuals to make sure that someone gets the information, including the homeowner and including the towns, so that they can make sure, hey, we know there's something wrong with this system, something doesn't look right. We'll make sure someone goes out eventually to see it. And then the last aspect, and the aspect that we feel is probably the most useful, is a comprehensive operation and management. So basically full O&M. And what that does is then the responsibility of the O&M falls onto the SUP. And what we've tried to create and what we've proposed to a few towns is a one price for everyone who has an IA system. It's the same price and includes everything the same. Now, obviously, if it's a seasonal home, it's probably not the same. It's probably a reduced price because there's not as much sampling that needs to be done. But for someone who lives year round or a system that needs to be sampled year round, it includes the regular inspections, it includes the sampling, it includes the lab processing, routine, and there's a certain number of non-routine calls, pumping, and then also replacement parts. And by replacement parts, we're not talking about large parts. We're talking more about like if a system needs a new pump or new hoses, things of that nature. We really didn't go out 20 or 30 years because there's a lot of uncertainty. I think when you go that far out, the home may not belong to the same person anymore. And so what we look at is really probably within the first 15 years. And so we have a pricing for that. The pricing is, very competitive. It's probably the same as um, the upper level of an O&M contract, like $1,200, something around there, maybe a little bit less. It really depends on the location and the um, um, the ratio between generally approved systems and, let's say, provisional systems or pilot systems, because those have to be sampled more. And then any subsidies that kind of can fall into place as well. And again, it's probably the one that we find the most useful because now we take the ownership of it. We also don't do all the work because the stuff also doesn't want to take you know doesn't want to really disturb a local economy, right? We don't want to necessarily take business away from an operator. They're important parts of the community, and we don't want to do that. So some of this work we actually outsource, but the key is we're responsible. So we make sure that it gets done, and we have the contract with an O&M company. And if they don't do their job, well, we find someone else to do it. For the operator, if this benefits them because there's a lot of administrative work that they no longer have to do. They don't have to go and collect payment. There's no billing involved with what they do. We're doing all that. We pay them based on the contract that we have with them. And I want to say, I think that's the last slide. So, any questions from anything that I talked about?
I have a question, part comment. I
Yeah,
guess I'm one.
I can't see him. Go ahead.
I'm
Go ahead.
wondering about your relationship with engineers and how that goes, how that works out. The collaboration, because as you know, boards of health, right, get plans from engineers, and I guess there's different ideas from engineers about, what systems are best, that may not necessarily meet the interests of, nitrogen reduction.
Right.
So that said, I guess I'm curious as to your experience and how that's going thus far.
Yeah, currently I think on the Mass TC side, we work with a lot of engineers and we know a lot of the engineers in the industry, especially the local engineers. Currently, most of the engineer talks happen within the towns as they review plans. That being said, the towns that we have relationships with, we're very much a partner. So most of them we meet weekly, if not, a few times a month, and we discuss, plans, and if they have questions about plans, they forward them to us. They'll say, what are your thoughts about this? The towns that we've also been working with, I guess the it may not have been so much of an issue yet because both most of the towns want 10 milligrams per liter. They don't want to have more than that going into the ground of nitrogen. So that kind of limits what systems they can use. So, it hasn't really necessarily been an issue because engineers going into those towns already know kind of which systems they can recommend anyway, if that makes sense. And there's not a big list of them, right? There's only 2 on the banner list. And one of which is not a standalone system.
Sherry, is there any way? Sherry, can we take the
What's up,
program?
Richard? I'm sorry.
Can we take the program slide down so I can see everybody? I can only see 3 people, 4 people at a time. That's what I want. Thank you.
There we go.
Great.
David had the power.
Yeah.
You had the power. Good job. Any other questions? Put your hand up or wave or something.
I might have a totally stupid question because I'm not living on the islands like you guys are and dealing with this like you are, but it seems to me that a lot of people this time of year leave the island and don't come back until it gets warm and they shut off their houses, they drain everything out, blah, blah, blah. What happens to I know that these IA systems are very biologically active and depend on bioactivity. So during the off season, if somebody's property is sitting idle and there's no new stuff going into the tank, am I missing something, or is there a possibility of a failure just because it's not getting used?
Good question.
Really? I'm shocked. Thank you.
I mean, I'll answer if no one else wants to, but I think it depends on the system, number one, but with the systems that we are seeing, the IA systems that we deal with a lot, there's a startup period. So if you shut it off, there's a startup period, but most of them do bounce back pretty quickly. Even the ones that remain on, a lot of them, as the temperatures get really cold, you'll see a change. They may not be as effective or as efficient, but they bounce back pretty well, pretty well. Like we'll test systems typically for seasonal homes. We'll test systems usually sometime early July, and then we'll do end of the season, and we still see really good results.
Yeah, and the other question I have is this morning we had a meeting with the folks from whatever the secretariat is that's doing the at the auxiliary housing right now, ADUs. And we met with actually the two top people on that program this morning. And one of the points that I made, because somebody from Western Mass was making the point that these new ADUs are going to create some strains on septic systems, and that's something that I think everybody is really acutely aware of on the Cape and Islands. But on the other side of that, it stands to reason that if people are going to add an ADU, they're going to need to go to the Board of Health for Title V, and that seems to be an entry point for the boards of health to say, okay, well, yeah, you want to add an ADU to your property here. That's all well and good, but you're going to have to put in the new IA system now. So that might be a positive side. I don't know, but have you guys thought about that at all?
Well, with ADUs, I think it's gonna be the same as if you're adding a bedroom. So it's gonna be dependent. They'll probably need to be an upgrade. We're seeing some of that, but I think that again, it'll be just kind of part of whatever the regulations are. So if there's an increase and the regulations say if you're increasing and now you need to have an EIA, well, that's what's going to need to happen. And we're seeing it. The one I visited today, the new system we were adding, that was the reason. It was increasing their bedroom count. So they had to their system by nature would not be able to handle that anymore. And they had a Title V, so now they had to upgrade to an EIA.
Thank you, and I'll shut up from this point. I appreciate that.
I see a question in the chat from Bill Vino on the staff of MVC. How many systems/properties are signed up with you now, and what
Right.
do you guess your capacity is?
So I was just answering it, but it'll be easier to just do it verbally. So we personally do over 50, but and what I mean personally is like we're actually visiting those, and we're able to do that with one field tech. But our business model and our plan is to outsource, right? So we have more of the overview of it. We don't necessarily want to hire a huge workforce to actually go out. More for emergencies and sampling and inspecting is really the key of what we're looking at. We want to be very conscious of the economy. We don't want to create another problem. We don't want to solve a problem, but then create another problem. And I think if you want buy-in, I think it's really important, at least on the Cape, it's really important for us to have been conscious of that. Because we obviously could have said, you know what, we're going to create a workforce that can handle all of it. But then we would have put out of business so many, companies that that definitely was not what we wanted to do. So the capacity, I think it's a hard question to answer because it's the oversight. And, as I said, in anticipation for more oversight, um, we hired I have a project assistant now. So who's a former Board of Health director. So we're right now we are mostly grant funded, so we are cautious with how soon we hire additional people. But in the short term, I think where we need to who we will hire or how we will expand will be more administrative assistance for billing as billing increases, and then also a few more field techs if again we want to go out and actually sample things ourselves, just to ensure that the sampling has been done correctly, almost a kind of a spot checking. So if an O&M contractor has gone out that we're contracted with, that we subcontracted with, goes out and tests, then we'll go out the next day to test again to see if our results are the same. And that's something that would just be good practice to make sure that keep everyone honest, right? And so that's kind of how we would expand. But again, our business model is really to outsource because it just makes more sense to do that.
Yeah. I see a question from Marina Lent.
Here I am.
There
There.
you are.
Um, so just wanting to make sure I get the concept correctly. You're trying not to put all these little testing companies out of business.
Mm-hmm.
The homeowner still makes the O&M contract with that company, whatever testing company. No,
No.
they make the contract with you. Oversight over these techies
right.
who go out and test is through you.
Right. So the way, and a town has a choice, it's up to the town, and towns that we've worked on Cape, they have different views. So, the O&M contract could be with us, right? It could be with us, or it could be with the town, and then the town, contracts with us to do the job. But if, let's say, the homeowner contracts with us, then what we do is we have a contract with, we go out to bid and we contract with another O&M provider that now, so they're contracted with us. So that's why what I said earlier, the responsibility falls on us. It's just that we're outsourcing some of the work, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
And you were saying that basically the Board of Health regularly gets copies of the test results and stuff like that. Is that correct?
They have access to it. It's on the
They
IA
have
database.
access to it.
Yep.
Yes. So if we see something that we don't like, we can ask you at any time, what's this about? Is this what you would have expected? Are we on track here?
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully you know, hopefully you would have heard from us if we felt that something was not right. If something didn't make sense to us, it would be in our notes.
Yes.
We put
Okay.
it in our notes, so you probably would see that on the database as well. If let's
Yeah.
say there was an issue, but it wasn't the issue made sense and we corrected it, then you would just see that on the notes. It would say
You
that.
are taking the onus off of the homeowner in a sense to maintain their system, to do all the bureaucratic paperwork that is needed to maintain a system that, unlike a classic Title V, you get your certificate of compliance and you don't have to think about it ever again. You just push the button until it starts to smell somewhere.
Right.
And here there is an onus of paperwork essentially, but also going along with testing and inspection, that you are taking that off the homeowner because it's been clear that left to the homeowner, everybody forgets. And you may get your first round of O&M and then it's like, oh yeah, forget about it. And it doesn't happen. Is
Right.
that
Right.
about?
That's
Yeah.
right. And then also too, as far as the pricing structure goes, we really want to make the experience, more similar as much as we can to someone who's being hooked up to a sewer. And,
Yeah.
there's one price annually and it's they're
Got
not paying much more above that. We try and include as much as we can within that. And so that was the other part of it. We wanted to try to
Yeah.
make it a better experience for the homeowner because it's overwhelming. And not only is it expensive,
Yes.
but it's overwhelming. So
Yes. Too
yeah,
much detail.
yeah.
You know? Yeah, good. Okay, that helped clarify.
Okay, I see Alexa's hand up.
Thanks, Richard. Forgive me if I missed this portion of the talk, but are you a private entity? I guess I'm trying to understand the difference between how things are working currently with the way we as health agents are working on tracking these IA systems with Barnstable County and what it is that you folks do and how you guys are connected or if not at all.
We're part of Barnstable County.
Right.
Yeah.
But currently, all of our IA systems are tracked through the Barnstable County database.
Right. So we oversee that.
You oversee that. Okay.
Yeah. So, right. So this is complementary to that. You know,
Okay.
they're separate, but it's complementary. It's now taking an extra step and now being also theoretically, if towns agree to it, being responsible for the O&M and making sure that the O&M is actually happening. And so the O&M contract is really with us versus being with a private company, right? It's with us, and then we outsource it. So we take the responsibility of making sure that the O&M, and that's one aspect of it, but we're making sure that that the O&M is actually happening and that these systems are being maintained in the best way possible. Again, we really
there's
did
more.
that.
So there's more like live tracking of what's going on, so that things aren't slipping through the cracks and people aren't signing up and then canceling their contract, and we don't, kind of catch the fact that they don't have an O&M for a couple of
Right.
years. So this is like a more of an oversight process.
It's more of an oversight and
Right.
or also when it comes to the installation, um, trying to bid out for more projects, like coupling projects together so that the prices can be more stable for each of the homeowners, and or try to keep that pricing from inflating unnecessarily because of the demand that there's going to be.
Excellent. Great. Thank you very much.
I also
John?
you're welcome. I also see a question from Fernando in the comments about
Who's that?
the negative repercussions to the groundwater generated by IA's installed systems that are not regularly maintained. So the problem is that they're not functioning the way that they're supposed to function. So for instance, I'll just use nitro. So nitro should not be putting more than 10 milligrams per liter of nitrogen into the ground, right? It many times it does better than that, but it should not be more than that, right? So if it's not properly maintained, it could wind up putting more into the ground than it's supposed to, right? And or it could wind up being more costly to the homeowner because there may need to be a repair. So that's really what's at stake. Especially on the Cape, we talk about watershed plans, right? And so when those permits are issued, they're issued so that there's only the total maximum daily load is at a certain number in that particular watershed. And so to reduce it, you need to kind of be at that point or lower. Well, many of these systems, groundwater it's not going to hit the watershed the next day. So you're not going to necessarily see the effect that you're having on the watershed in the short term. So all you really truly can rely on is that the systems, how you identified you needed this system to work, is working. And the only way you can really do that is through your sampling and inspecting. And so if that's not happening, then you're also taking the risk that the system is not performing the way you needed it to perform. And if enough of them do that, then that could throw off what your goal was initially. And the towns on the Cape are responsible for that. So we want to kind of make sure they have the best information possible.
John Shirless has his hand up.
David, thank you very much. It's been extremely interesting. I'm very glad that it's also being recorded. Because of my circumstances, through the first 2/3 or so of your presentation, I may not have caught everything, so forgive me. But I've noticed, for example, here, I'm in West Tisbury, that the Board of Health, for example, collects data. I mean, in this case, not on a septic system, but for example, water quality data from Uncle Seth's pond. But they don't, in fact, compile it. They don't even have a spreadsheet or a database of all the data that they've collected that's been analyzed by the lab, the tribe in Aquina. Analogously, I discovered that the records, the Board of Health for septic systems don't specify what type of system there is. It might include that there is an alternative system, but it doesn't say what it is. And I was wondering whether that might be possible for towns that aren't actually signed up with you, just to utilize the work that you've done, for which I applaud you heartily. I mean, you particularly, that you've taken this on and how you've transformed the way this is being done, to develop the simple data holding capacity to, for example, show when an AI system is installed within their town, what it is, when it's installed, and who's responsible. Then at least, even if they're not compiling the data themselves, they've got some kind of a record, if only even for subsequent homeowners, but also for any other interested party. So is there outreach that you're doing with towns with which you're not actually contracted that could allow you to facilitate our common efforts?
Right. So all the towns, as far as the IA database goes, which is even though we oversee it, it's a separate program from Barnstable County. All the towns are on it. So they all have access to that. We're also, I didn't mention this earlier, but we are revamping it. We're trying to make the database even more user-friendly, but also we're trying to find ways to alert the health agents easier. So instead of them kind of checking through all of the systems, we want to create like an alarm system, kind of similar to what we have when we're alerted when an O&M contract is not in place. We're trying to create that also with results, so that if something is out of the ordinary, the health agent will get a list of these are the systems that don't seem to be performing as they should be, and or systems that are missing results. So we're working on that. The operator side, the new version of the operator side of this system should hopefully be out in the first quarter of next year. And for them, what we're focusing on is how can we make their job easier? How can we ensure to make it as easy as possible for them to put the results in, so it's not like an arduous process. But then the next phase will be the municipalities and on the administration side. So hopefully at some point next year, those updates should be out.
You might have said this already, but do you work with any of the towns on Martha's Vineyard?
With the IA database, we work with all the towns with the IA database, but not with the septic utility program.
Okay, that was my question. Yes. Mm-hmm. And is that because you're just limited to Barnstable County?
It hasn't come up. Obviously we're focused on Barnstable County. We're an entity of Barnstable County, but it hasn't come up. I think the first time that it came up is when we did our Waste No Water tour, library tour in Tisbury. And so that was the first time that question actually came up to us, if we would want to contract with the town on the Vineyard. And I think that's something I would have to bring to my commissioners. As an entity, legally, we can do that. But I think if there is interest, that's something I would bring to my commissioners. I don't foresee why they wouldn't. Again, all the towns on the Vineyard and Nantucket are part of our IA database already. So this would just be a natural extension of it. I think off Cape, and we've been approached also from off Cape, I think that really probably we wouldn't expand to off Cape, maybe somewhere in the future, but I think our focus really truly has to be the Cape and the islands because we just have, you know, there's too much to do here for us to really focus off onto the mainland.
Do you have an idea of the number of new IA systems that have been installed?
Oh, I would have to get that. I saw a number recently, but I would have to get that, especially if you want me to include the Vineyard, because that I don't have that number, but I can get that number.
Good.
But
Thank
that's
you.
an easy number for us to get.
Yep. Marina, I see your hand again.
Because the question from John raised an interesting thing that first I wanted to clarify, and then it made me think further, and this might be a little beyond the subject matter of today's meeting, but the testing of individual ponds, you referred to Seth's Pond, this is only because it's a bathing beach and it's only for bacterial content. It is not for nitrogen. So that then made me think, okay, it's very interesting. We're doing all this and poor ponds and all that nitrogen. Is the commission routinely and systematically testing coastal ponds for nitrogen? And I know that's beyond what David, what your responsibility is. You've got a very nice, clear mandate here to make this easier. But where do we find out where the rubber meets the road on actual results for nitrogen?
The commission does test the coastal ponds for nitrogen. We do at least 4 tests in each pond each summer.
John, I see your hand again.
Thanks. I probably just confused the issue by stating what I meant as just an analogy about data management, where there's discrepancy between what would seem to me to be a very simple thing, which is to actually compile and make available in the form of a spreadsheet data that is being collected and the actual circumstances, which is that it's not. And so I found that the same thing applied with respect to what I thought would be a simple issue of trying to find out who has an IA system, what sort of system is it, and so on. And it just seems to me that that's something that is very useful to be able to know, but it's not yet the case. And so I'm hoping that that'll be invested in here on the Vineyard, perhaps even before there's any contractual relationship with David's program. But David, I also wanted to applaud you as well, because I mean I'm sitting here looking out at yet another coastal plain pond, kettle pond on the Vineyard next to Uncle Seth's in the form of Old House Pond. And decades ago, one neighbor took it upon herself incredibly admirably to put in an IA system. And I had some leads through the Water Alliance and otherwise, but it was an astonishing amount of time and effort that she had to put in to find a system, and then to find a system that was something that somebody could do here on the Vineyard and everything else. And then given the days, the amount of energy and time involved in making it work or trying to ensure that it was working and so on was in fact just completely ridiculous. So it's nice to have things progressing. And I think what you're doing is, through, I guess, your own sort of gap analysis, something that is incredibly important, and it'll be very interesting to see how your program facilitates the expansion of the utilization of these systems.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are also very conscious of there needing to be even more systems, right? There needs to be more technology. And that that's a whole nother issue because it's very costly in Massachusetts for systems to go through the whole process for general approval. So we recently had a seminar, or not a seminar, a summit, I should say, with the EPA and some other not-for-profit groups like TNC, and really looking at what are the next steps and what do we need to do. And so, there needs to be more political outreach to really the problems and the issues that are here. And, can the route to general approval be a bit more simplified, especially if data can be obtained from outside of Massachusetts in regions that are similar to Massachusetts. So, we're talking today really about, the septic utility program, but together with Mass TC, there's a lot of other things that we're doing. Besides the education, we're also looking at how do we get more technology approved in Massachusetts. And then we're also looking at climate change and how is that going to affect septic systems. We're doing research on that because that's also important. If our groundwater rate rises, well, that's going to be an issue for a lot of septic systems. So there's a lot, and then workforce development. The workforce for installers and operators are aging out, and so that's a huge another initiative that we're looking at to really try to ensure that there's a long-term workforce to be out there to install these systems and then do the O&M on these systems. So yeah, there's a lot of moving parts to it.
Sarah, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. So you answered one of my questions about workforce development, because that's certainly a concern, because as you say that there's installers are aging out. And so there's that piece. So then I was wondering about, the continuing education on IA systems, on the Cape, if there's any plans for that. But I was also wondering about, I heard you say that your program is grant funded, what your plans are for sustainability of your program.
Sure. So as far as the education aspect, so we're putting together a certification program for installers and operators. As I mentioned on Cape, we really leave it to the individual towns to utilize us the way they need us. And so it may not be the same from town to town. So we still want to do as much as we can to make sure that the information on properly installing and maintaining these systems is out there, and that installers and operators are certified to do it, so that towns can look at a list and say, okay, I know this person went through this training. As far as long-term sustainability, we're paid through the contracts that we have, and that's the long term. So right now, towns on the Cape, many of them are not even at that point yet where they have their watershed plan done. There are other towns that are much further along that we're doing work for already. So as more towns are added to the septic utility program, we will easily become self-sustainable, mainly because we're not looking to hire this enormous workforce. We really want that oversight capability, and again, at most, sampling and inspecting. So, but right now we knew that the first 2 to 3 years, we needed to do a lot of work to get to that point, and so that's why we went for grant funding.
So if you have a contract with the town, does the town have to pay? It must have to pay something for that, right?
Yeah, when I say contract with town, it could also just be that the town established that the homeowners who have EIA systems within that town need to contract with us. So the contract could certainly not be with the town. It could actually be with the homeowner, which seems to be a bit more common. But the town is the one that would say, if you have an EIA system, the SUP is the program that you will contract with, and then, again, we'll outsource that, but it could certainly be with the homeowner.
And remind us again, what does it cost the average homeowner?
Yeah, for someone who has a system that is year round, it's anywhere between like just under 1,000 to about 1,200. 1,200 that's kind of like the max. And again, it depends on the mix of units. It depends on the mix of generally approved to provisional, because once you reduce the amount of sampling that needs to happen and inspections, that is probably the most costly aspect of the O&M contract, is that of going out and not only doing the work and getting the samples, but then actually having a lab process the samples.
But
And
this
does
is
that fee the
annual.
homeowners pay, does that cover your costs, or
I'm sorry?
The fee that the homeowners pay, does that cover your costs?
Mhm.
Or probably not, huh?
Well, I mean, yeah, it does. I mean, it covers our cost. I mean, we figure into the cost calculation that we have is, well, it covers our present costs, I guess is the best way to say it, because we figure everything is included within that to run our program. And so, yeah, it covers that. What we do exclude from it, so again, we want to be as competitive as possible. So since most of our salaries are already covered by grants, that's not something that we then add so we take that out of the contract, but what we factor in long term is that those provisional units, some of those provisional technologies are going to have general approval soon, right? So we know in the future that a system right now that has to be visited 4 times a year is only going to need that sampling and inspecting twice a year. So that, again, that cuts that cost right in half.
Great. Anybody else have questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead, Fred.
So I think this is a great idea to develop a network of monitoring and sort of a safety net, it seems like. One question I have is if there's a fixed cost for all the homeowners, has there been any resistance to monitoring companies signing on if it takes away their ability to set their own prices? There seems to be like a little bit of a conflict of interest there for a company that's in business to make money they might hesitate to sign on to a program like this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely a concern for some of the operators. And so, well, when we've had those concerns, the way that we've presented the situation is we've shown them, this is how much you may make on a contract right now, but you're also having to support the whole billing process and the administrative work of it, which now you no longer have to do, which actually frees up your time to actually service more customers and more clients. So, I mean, it doesn't make everyone happy, but as far as the Cape goes, for the towns that want us to do that portion of it, those operators know that they can't, it's a town-wide initiative. So it's not something that they necessarily, if they want to work within that town, they're going to have to kind of comply with it. What we try to do is we want to have that great relationship with them. So we kind of show them, well, you may not be able to set your price, but I think that our pricing is extremely competitive. So it's not, when you take out the administrative work, they're still getting pretty close to what, they would have gotten.
Great. Anybody else? Oh, there's John again.
Thanks. I was wondering, given the pros that we have on the call from the town boards of health, Sherry as well, and perhaps others, whether any of you all have any reactions just now to David's presentation with respect to what you think might be in this for the Vineyard, for towns on the Vineyard as we go ahead.
Nobody wants to speak up.
In terms of
I'm happy to
next
speak up.
steps.
I'm the health agent in Oak Bluffs, and I do think a program like this, I think we've been talking about it amongst ourselves for a little bit here, because I do think that there's been a little bit of a lack of oversight. And I know that, my admin will pull out a file and we'll go to look up something and we realize that, oh, this person's O&M, expired, and we, didn't know about it. And now we're, tracking somebody down. So I think that there would be a great benefit to the towns on the island for something like this. And I don't think the cost is going to be any more really to the homeowner than they're already paying, because they're already forking over money to have this testing done. So I think it might just be in my opinion, it seems like it might be an easier process, not only for the boards of health, but also for the homeowners.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way to me. There's more uniformity, more dependable.
Yeah, I
Exactly,
definitely agree with
exactly.
Melissa.
And I totally agree. It's like we will eventually get the DEP regulations that we need to have more IA systems, and then it's going to just overwhelm. It's like the boards of health, you guys are in charge of so many things that you know, tracking this is just, you know, it's gonna I could easily see that it slips. So I just think it's so much easier and it's uniform. And that's kind of why we were looking at this now before we get too many IA systems in the ground. You know, town of Tisbury, you know, that Board of Health agent, Alex, is just overwhelmed with it right now. So, but before more of the towns have to get them, I think this would be nice to have a nice system in place, and we could kind of, you know, take baby steps getting into it rather than, you know, all of a sudden we have so many of them. I'm sorry, it was Drew in Tisbury.
And I
know
also think the process in Barnstable right now, I do think with what's been going on the Cape and the IA systems that are getting installed, that process there and the folks that are working on it there are also fairly overburdened.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just to have some idea, just, you know, just for the homeowners too, it's because it's overwhelming right now. You know, the prices are so different, the permitting, it's like maybe we could streamline permitting and planning and design so that it's all ready for them, just to make it a little easier for them too. Because, you know, like David said, you can get a bid from $40,000 up to $100,000. And we would have to train more people to install them here, or, you know, make them want that to be their career. Yes.
Yep,
A lot of
I
things
think this-
going on.
This makes a lot of sense in so many different ways. Anybody else? Thoughts? Oh, there's John again.
This is very inspiring. I did just want to note, sitting here in West Tisbury, that I mentioned West Tisbury examples because those are ones that I know. It's not in any way to call into question the Board of Health, what they do and don't do, but because I understand, as Sherry's indicated, you know, already it's overwhelming what's going on. I mean, it's probably overwhelming, if only because of the increased population here. So I guess if there's a way to take, as Sherry said, baby steps to get ready for this kind of thing, either, you know, by building capacity or even just noting that administratively that it'll be useful to have things, you know, data accessible, would be great. And so I think it's very inspiring, and David, again, in what you're doing. So thanks. Thank you
So-
all.
Quick comment as West Tisbury Board of Health agent, one of them. Thank you for your comments. No offense taken. You know, and we'd love to hear your input or your feedback. And so, you know, feel free to come in or give us a call, and have a sit down and have a conversation. Because, you know, as a community member, we want to hear what you have to say.
This may actually help with affordable year-round housing. Should be nice.
That's how I really got involved with MassTech, is just, you know, working with Laura and trying to do affordable housing. Laura's very big into urine diverting toilets, but we're not going to go there right now. Just if we can't solve the nitrogen problem, we can't have the housing. And
That's right.
so we really have to do something. And the DRIs, the affordable housing, comes to the commission, and, you know, I hold their feet to the fire that they have to meet the nitrogen requirements. And that's a huge expense for them. So, you know, we need to do more all around the island rather than, well.
Yep, it's really important. Well, all right, I think we're done, David. Thank you very much. I don't know if anybody else has anything they want to talk about that's off the subject.
How do we
That's
get in
it.
touch with you, David? How do we get in touch with you?
No, I'll put my information in the
Yeah. And are you going to share those slides that you?
Yeah.
It'd be
I
great if
can.
you could share the slides. Thank you.
David
Absolutely.
can send me the slides and then I will send the recording of this and David's contact info and his
Okay.
slides in the
Sounds
next
good.
couple of days. Once,
That'd be
once the
great.
cloud figures out how to download this, it sometimes takes me a bit. So I'll try to do that next week. But great. Thank you so much, David. It was
You're
really
welcome. Thank you.
educational.
All right. Well, I guess we can all go Christmas shopping.
Yeah. Happy holidays. See you all next year.
That'd be a great present to give somebody. I'm going to give you an IA system.
I know you're talking to
I
me,
wish I knew
Richard.
what to be
Thank
one.
you.
Yeah, bring it on. I'll take it. Except you got to do the annual contract as well.
Mm.
Throw that in.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank
Great.
you, everybody.
enough.
Great to see you. Happy New Year as well.
Bye-bye. Thanks a lot. Bye, Sherry.